Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's always nice to be here with you guys. So today I thought I would switch it a little bit because sometimes I get questions how it is being black in Denmark. So let's do this. So when I first came to Denmark, one of the first things I had to realize very fast as being black in Denmark was do not hold hands with your same-sex friends. So I come from Uganda and we have a different culture. When you're best friends, like say girl to girl, boy to boy, you hold hands, you do a lot of things together without any sexual connotation. However, when I first came to Denmark, me and my friend, she's also from Uganda, we would hold hands and walk in the streets and people were staring at us and staring at us. And it took us a while to realize why, because then people thought maybe we were gay, we were lesbians or something like that. So don't do that when you're black in Denmark because people have a different idea. And then you should get used to seeing people kissing. So back home where I come from, even when you're in a relationship, you don't just sit like when you're having a gathering and then you all sit and just start kissing and smooching and all those things. It's more or less very private. But here, it's very normal. You have to get used to people on the bus, in public places, on the train. People just sit next to you, even teenagers, wherever it is, and kiss. It's very normal. And then the issue of hair, being black in Denmark. There are not so many places where you can go and plait your hair, and it's very, very expensive. And most times you will have to travel such a long distance. For example, where I live 1.5 kilometers away from Copenhagen, and most times there are not so many people who can make black hair around here, so I have to travel to the city. However, because of that, I forced myself to learn how to make hair. So these days I braid my daughter's hair because I have 2 girls. So you'll have to learn to do some of the things yourself, or you'll have to really, really travel a long distance. And the other thing also, people are going to be very curious about your hair, especially here in Denmark, because they're not used to people switching up their hairstyle all the time. So every time you change your hairstyle, people are going to stare at you sometimes. People are going to ask lots of questions. And sometimes there are people who are never going to recognize you. Because I remember sometimes when I went to class every time with a new hairstyle, some people didn't even recognize, like, who are you? And then when they hear me speak, they're like, oh, okay, it's. And even sometimes my workmates would not recognize me when I changed my hairstyle. So this is not something they're used to. And the other thing, there are people who are going to be so curious, they want to touch your hair, asking lots of questions. But as a black woman, sometimes we don't want people asking so much about our hair. We don't want people coming and touching our hair. Don't do that. Don't do that, And then also, as a black person, sometimes people are there are stereotypes. People are going to come and ask you questions based on stereotypes. And for example, people are going to assume, oh, you're so lucky to be here in Denmark. Life must be much better for you here. People always assume that you left your country because maybe you had it so bad, and they think that maybe you coming here, life is much better. That's not always true, actually. So people are going to ask you some dumb questions sometimes based on stereotypes. And then as a black person, especially as a woman, there's going to be limited options for makeup. You're not going to easily get makeup for black women in the local drugstore, in the local shops. So most times what happens is, when I want my powder, my makeup, I have to travel up to Copenhagen, or I have to order it offline. And also most skincare products for black people, you're not going to easily get it still. You must pander and go to Copenhagen. And then life is very expensive. So as a black person coming especially from Africa, do not try to convert the money into your own currency. Otherwise, you're not going to want to buy anything, because the amount into your own currency, you're going to start imagining how much you could have done with that amount of money, you know. And then sometimes there are going to be misunderstandings due to language, and this is something I experienced. So I come from a country that mostly speaks English. And in English, there are certain expressions that can be considered rude. And for example, sometimes I would go to work, or sometimes something would happen maybe during the day, and I am so worked out, I don't feel good about it, and all those things. And then maybe I'd come home and tell somebody in Danish, and then they would be like in English you say, so what? So what? But now I'm forgetting how they say it in Danish, I'm sorry. So well, you know. And I would feel like, oh my God, that is so rude. Why would you say that, you know? But it took me a while to understand that in Danish, sometimes it's harmless. It's harmless. So there's certain expressions in English. Don't try to translate them directly into they may not have the same meaning or concept in Danish. And no borrowing from neighbors. Yes, I know us, most black people back home, we like to borrow things from each other. Like, I could be cooking and I'm out of salt or onions. I can just easily go and knock at my neighbor's door and I would borrow some. Be prepared, in Denmark, you don't do that. And then you can't show up at people's doors unexpected. Of course, maybe between us, the black people, we can do that to each other, but I'm still not sure. Life is so busy here. You always have to make appointments for example, sometimes you have to make an appointment with somebody even 6 months prior, or even a year, you know. So there's nothing like just showing up. Then education. The other thing, I think education is very, very, the atmosphere of education in Denmark is very, very relaxed. Apart from the difference in education system, this is what I realized. In Uganda, everything was so tense. When the teacher walked in, you were like this, you're sitting and you're saying sir, madam, and all these things. You know, it was almost like you're in front of a policeman. But here, it's so relaxed. Students and teachers are joking around, you know. Students come into the lecture room or wherever it is with their phones. It's not like people are policing you. You should do this, you should not do this. It's a very relaxed atmosphere. Teachers and students are friendly with each other. So when you come here, that is something you have to get used to. Don't get shocked at the relationship students and teachers have here. It's not yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. No, even students take a break with teachers and smoke. And then there's a cultural difference sometimes when you're eating. Of course, there's a cultural difference between, there is that cultural difference. But for example, where I come from, if there's a party and all those things, so you'll put all the food on the table, meat, fish, chicken, all this and that and that. So as the guests, you decide what you want to eat first. You know, if you want to mix everything up in one plate, it's up to you. But in Denmark, I realized when you come for such events, usually maybe they don't bring a whole mix of everything at once. They have an order in which they eat. So maybe they will start with fish, and later they'll take the beef and the pork and things like that. And also, when they eat, they have different ways of eating different things. You don't just mix things up here because it works for your taste buds, you know. You will have to figure out sometimes you have to ask, okay, how do I eat this? Does this and that go with? you know. And whereas where I come from, just eat as you want, just do the whole mix, just you as you want. That was it from me, being black in Denmark. So whatever I say in this video is just my own experience. It is not an experience that of other people. Other people might have other different experiences. Now let's talk about racism. Have I experienced racism in Denmark? Are there racists in Denmark? Overall, I don't think Denmark is a racist country. I don't look at it like that, but there are just a few bad apples here and there. There will always be that in every society. Oh, have I experienced racism in that way? Let me see. The only times I remember we went to a few years back, we went to a club in Copenhagen to dance. And we arrived in a group who were two black girls and three black guys, our friends. And then when we reached, this happened not only once, a couple of times, where we would go to the club and reach at the door, the bouncers would let the girls in and they would refuse to let our black friends, the boys, in. And yet when other group would come, maybe they're all Danish, the men and the women, they would all be allowed in. So yeah, that was some kind of racism towards our black brothers. So what would happen in the end, would all leave and just decide not to go in. However, my children have experienced racism. There was an instance at the daycare where I went to pick up my kids, and one of the child runs to us and holds the nose and says, why should there be brown people here? There should never be brown people here. So in that situation, I talked to the daycare and they handled that situation very well. They talked to the kid and yeah, I have no complaint. They handled it really, really well. And then another time, I remember I was on the bus and it was some teenage girls. And for some reason, they thought it was just funny to keep saying nigger, 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 you know. I took it up with them, immediately went and talked to them. I told them it was not okay and that would not be tolerated. And then my son sometimes, recently actually, a parent called him nigger, and it's something we're trying to figure out how to handle the issue, because I don't think it is okay. It's never okay, especially for a parent. No matter what the child has done, you should never go the racist way. Like, that is below the belt. So yeah, those are a few instances of racism. Yeah. It's always a sad thing, you know. Nobody should be judged in any way because of the color of their skin. But overall, Denmark is a very lovely country. Yeah, so